And welcome back to another episode of Containers from the Couch. My name is Mesh. I'm joined here today by Sergey and Yuri, which will both introduce themselves a lot better than I can. And we're going to be talking a little bit about ECS and our console. But before we start, Sergey, would you like to please introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Mish. I think you'll do a good job introducing me, but since I have to do it myself.
We work together a bit, but it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Sergey. I work at AWS as a product manager for ECS, focusing on console. Before working in different other companies, working with containers, and today we're going to talk about console, as Mish said already. And Yuri, why don't you go next?
All right, thank you. My name is Yuri. I'm a senior front-end engineer with Amazon ECS. I'm relatively new to the team. Just joined back in July 2021. And the new console, well, I've been worked in software for about 12 years. But yeah, relatively new to Amazon. The new console has been my biggest focus, biggest project since day one. Really excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. And my name is Michael Casing. I'm a developer advocate for the ECS service team. And hi, Mike. I think it's good to see you here. Mike is one of our container heroes, so glad to have you here as well. For everybody in the chat, please feel free to drop your comments. Any questions that you have, we'll try and take them throughout the show. We love your feedback, of course. And without waiting any longer than that, let's talk about the ECS Service Console. So we came out with a tiny announcement last week, which we released on our What's New post, which was something about the ECS console and defaults. So before we start with that, what is the ECS console version 2? What's the difference between them? Why is this a big thing for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tiny announcement that we've worked for a long time for, and while this is could be a small change from outside, we have worked very. We thought about this day and this experience for a while, and thought about how we can make this best for our customers. So the new experience is an upgraded interface that introduces several improvements to the classic console, or old experience that a lot of users had to use for more than 8 years now. The new experience is not only completely redesigned using the new, more user-friendly design system, but it also has better guided workflows. It has a lot of improvements for the accessibility. It has a lot of improvements for being more friendlier. Like dark mode is, probably one of the Yuri's favorite features. And in short, the new experience is more secure, it's more usable, and it's something that would allow us to get features and get more better experience for our customers faster. So that's what the new experience is really about. But of course, there's a lot of challenges which comes when we do the new experience, and how we can migrate. And I hope we can unveil some of that feedback that we get from users, and we can talk about this today.
Okay. And there's one major change I think we made with the fact of using Console 2, which was something about CloudFormation as well, which we're changing slightly the way we provision resources when the customer provisions a new task or a new service or a new cluster.
Yes. Before we go into that, let's, what is Amazon ECS is, right? Amazon ECS.
Well, of course. Because not everybody's a seasoned user like the people which we have on the chat, but it could be people which don't know. So please, for sure, of course, I forgot about that. So what is ECS?
Right. So, I mean, ECS stands short for Elastic Container Service. It's AWS fully managed serverless container orchestrator that helps you to launch containerized applications on a cloud, on AWS. And it's deeply integrated with AWS. It provides the simplicity, security, but also a scale. So it allows you to launch an application of any scales with the containers on AWS and leverage all other AWS services in the process. I mean, probably even more than I am, right, Mesh, like being the developer advocate for ECS. you have been asked that question more than probably I am. So why don't you also highlight few favorite things you like about ECS and maybe some people don't know about?
So firstly, which also came up on the question of, does it cost money? So essentially, ECS as a service doesn't cost you anything. In other words, the control plane and the management of provisioning your containers and orchestrating your containers is part of the managed service, and you don't pay for that amount. What you do pay, of course, for is the compute resources that you use, if it is either an EC2 instance running underneath, or if you're using Amazon or AWS Fargate for provisioning, as like we call the serverless containers. These are compute resources which run your containers. You will pay for that amount of compute time that you're using, either as a full instance or as partly as a task definition. That's the first thing. The second thing, it is integrated very well with the rest of our AWS native services, because it's the same kind of API, the same kind of usage patterns that you use, same tooling you can use as well, same, for example, SDKs, everything which is involved by using regular AWS APIs, you can use the same thing with ECS, which makes it very, very easy for our customers to adapt to and use on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I see some questions and discussions starting in the channel, in the comments. Like, while as Mesha already told, like ECS is free, it's an orchestration engine, and the capabilities of that it brings with it, like a security and scalability, that are free. And when you have an ECS cluster or like environment set up with ECS, those things are free. But underlying AWS resources, that you will have to set up, like compute, CPU memory, you still will have to pay for it based on your free tier usage or the configurations that you will select. So you might end up getting charged based on what type of the workload you will launch. So we can make it clear. But basically, there's no overhead from the ECS itself.
Right. So I mentioned before something about a couple of the changes. Besides all the awesome things we're going to see, there was one, I think, significant thing which we did change, was the fact of the way we provision resources with CloudFormation. I'm sure, Yuri, you're going to show us a demo of this very soon when we get to that.
Yes.
But can you explain to me what that actually means?
Yeah, Yuri, why don't you go ahead and try to explain what we changed?
Yeah. For those who are not familiar with CloudFormation, it's an AWS service that uses infrastructure as code to help our customers manage their application or infrastructure. In ECS, when a customer tries to create a cluster or try to launch a service, it's usually not a single resource. Like a cluster can use a bunch of EC2 hosts. ECS service can have a load balancer or can have auto-scaling policies. Like, how do you manage all those in one place? CloudFormation is a great solution to that. We make that whole process into a single transaction. When you create a service from the console, it launches a CloudFormation stack in your account, and all the work is being done in the background. You can leave the console, you can grab a coffee and come back, and your service will be ready. When you are done with the service, you just need to delete the stack, or you delete from the console will also delete your stack. So all the associated resources, whatever was created during the whole process, will be cleaned up. Or if you're looking to expand to a different region, you don't have to go through all the forms again. You just use the same template, adjust a few parameters, and launch your service or your cluster in a whole different region. Everything will be exactly the same as the previous one you set up from the console.
So if I can just understand what you're saying, that when we provision a task or a service, we're provisioning a CloudFormation template. And one of the awesome thing about this as well, as you said, was you can take this actual template and use that to provision resources in other regions and in other accounts as well, by, of course, changing certain parameters inside. But this kind of generates the code for you, and you don't have to worry about generating the code yourself, writing CloudFormation on your own. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
Awesome. Nice.
Yeah, the way also to think about this is, as we're going towards having a more complicated applications, like you have more things that you need, like you need the load balancers, you need different type of VPCs set up, and setting this up could be a lot of form clicking, as Yuri said. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a guided experience where we provide intuitive defaults in the new experience, in the new console, yet underneath, we're generating the CloudFormation template that gives you the free kind of customization that you want, and you can migrate that. You can download those templates, you can put them into your CI/CD solution like without like crafting them again. And I think this is like just the start, but that's the direction we are taking. We talked a little bit more about this in the blog post for the announcement, but that's one of the big changes that we introduced. That's a subtle change, but it's quite fundamental.
Okay. There was a question which came back from where can we find these templates actually which are provisioned with this new console?
Yeah, they're all in the CloudFormation console, which I will demo shortly. When you create a service or task, there's a convenient link that takes you right to the stack.
Okay. I have a question for both of you, and I am kind of an old-fashioned person. We say if something isn't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
So why did we make these changes in the ECS console? Why did we need a version 2?
So we had actually those conversations with a lot of customers, and if you one of the customers who went into the new console or an old console and clicked, there's a button to leave us a feedback. You can actually go ahead and do it, and our team reviews that feedback. And we got a lot of the feedback when customers didn't like the change, right? We understand that the change can be frustrating. We also had a customer saying, the product needs to be like a nuclear reactor. You don't change the interface of a nuclear reactor, because that we understand that the customer treats the CS as an extension of their production, right? And like they don't want to go and change, see the changes to the interface all of a sudden when they debugging or troubleshooting the production incident. So that's why, even though we introduced the change, we still have the classic console available. It's quite easy to switch back. You go on the left side of every page, there's a toggle. When you click on it, you go back to the classic console, and you will continue using it for a temporary 48 hours period. This experience stays. That's preference is saved, but you're going to switch. We're going to continue to switch you back, but if you really need to, you can reach out to us and we can figure out what to do to make it more permanent for you. But our goal eventually is to make sure that your experience is secure, your experience is more usable, and your experience using the console is more adaptable to the things we are bringing, like the new features. And the technologies move forward, like the browsers change, the technologies underneath the browsers change. So because of that, we need to take make choices. And that's what you see here. Like the new console is an upgraded technology stack. It's more secure, it's more available, it's more stable than the previous one, and it's more efficient. And it's better for the customers in the end run. Like while we understand that the change is hard, so that's why we're changing it. Like from our perspective, we want to make that change as easy as possible. But I have friends, I am myself, like you open an app and you see like they changed everything and you don't like it. I get that.
I mean, we're all pretty much the same of what's happening if you're on Twitter, yes or no. The things are moving around all the time, left and right in the last however long. We don't know where everything is anymore, but that's the way of the world. Things move forward.
Right. But like we don't take those decisions lightly. There's a process of reviewing those decisions. And as I said, like that's the direction we're taking because that's the best for the customers, not because we want to, put the orange buttons instead of the gray buttons.
They're nice, the orange buttons, but that's not the only reason. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is everything which is currently, sorry, Yuri, is there one more question before we continue on to the demos? Is everything which is currently available today in the ECS console available in the new console? One-to-one? Are there any gaps that we should be aware of when customers are using them? And if there are, what happens?
Yuri, do you want to take down this? And I think you wanted to add something to the previous question, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just quickly.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest lessons I learned in my career is software is never complete. So the new console is not something we built. We call it finished, it's released, and we're moving on to the next project. The new console is a completely new stack. It's using the new Amazon design system, which is called Cloudscape. And that's open source. We're continuously improving our UI. We're continuously pushing out new features. We are continuously talking to our customers, like what they like, what they don't like, what they want to see. And the new console just allows us to iterate much faster, to make improvements much faster. And back to the parity question, I believe most of the workflows can be done in the new console. There are a few things that are still missing. We're actively working on them. One example could be schedule tasks, and a lot of people are looking for them. The old console is still available if your workflow relies on features that are not yet in the new console. Feel free to use the toggle near the top left corner and switch back to the old console to complete your workflow. But do check back often. You'll be surprised on how fast we add features to the new console.
Yeah, and if it's more complicated and you want to give us a feedback, you can always reach out through the standard support channels. There's also a way to leave a feedback by clicking on the link which you will demonstrate in the demos. There's also a public GitHub roadmap for AWS containers. You can raise an issue there, and this is where a lot of customers leave their feedback and issues, including the task definition deletion issue is there, and the status for. I see some of the questions from Mike here, like, can I delete an ECS task definition? This is actually something that we're actively working on. You can see the latest update, and new console is one of the reasons we want to get that console to all users. Not faster, but like we want to get it, and we weigh all the pros and cons of that, because we can get the new features in front of those users, and so like when we get the task definition deletion or other things, like those users available to benefit from it immediately. So that's one of the advantages of like, even if you're not able to use the new console fully yet, like maybe you're missing the schedule task and that's your primary workflow, we encourage everyone still kind of try to go back to the new console and really try to educate yourself to that experience. And as Yuri told, we are actively working to closing the feature gap. ECS is a very feature-rich service, with more than a year, 8 years old history of development and meeting customer demands. Customer requests. We are, I think we at this point migrated almost 90% of the features from the classic console to the new console. So this, like, last mile is what's left. And if you're really missing something, just tell us.
For sure. And I can say that, for example, as I also said on the previous show, every single issue or comment which comes into our GitHub repo, I get in my inbox, every single one of them, and I notice every single one of them. And both Yuri and Sergey can attest to the fact that when I see something specific with the console, they're the first people that we let them know, even though they're looking at these things themselves. But I'm up at different hours of the day, so at least I can kind of preempt that when we're on different time zones. But yes, that feature feedback is very, very much appreciated and very well listened to. And thank you very much. If you continue to find some kind of a gap, please let us know.
Awesome. I think at this point, like, we already said a lot of praises to people who still tolerating this switch. We understand how the user experience is when it's changing. It could be frustrating, but again, like this is important. Let's move on to the demos. I think this is
Yuri,
cool,
I'm going to leave.
All right. Okay, before we start, I'd like to show you how to get to my favorite mode of using the console. So if you click on your account and go to settings, if you haven't used the console in a while, you'll notice there's a new display settings option. Let me quickly switch that to dark mode.
I told it's his favorite feature.
And mine as well, for sure.
I use everything in dark mode. All right.
Yeah. So there was a question in the comments, like, do we recommend using the new console or old console? We recommend you using the new console in a dark mode. I'm kidding. Like, official recommendation. Official recommendation is like, we recommend you using the new console. Please switch to old classic console when you only have features that I'm currently missing. There is a documentation page which lists all the features that are not yet migrated. The schedule task is probably the number one. Okay, dark side. Come on, Yuri.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, make sure to check back on that settings page often because Cloudscape is continuously being updated. I can't tell you all the great things we're working on, all the amazing UI features are coming your way. And the new console will be one of the first to get those. Okay, this is the new console in dark mode. Most things are in the same place as they were in console v1. You will notice a few differences, which I'll go through. But for today's demo, we're just gonna try to deploy an application, and I hope it works.
The demo gods will be with us.
Yes. I'm praying to the demo gods. I don't have any clusters in my account. I guess I'll start from there. Here's our whole new Quick Cluster experience. The form is much shorter than v1. Also, please do let me know if I'm going too fast. If you use the old console, I don't know if you still remember. I remember I have to manually pick VPC, manually find all the subnets. But in the new console, everything is pre-selected. Fargate is already, I can just create a cluster right here just by providing a name. But for today's demo, I'm going to do a little bit more. Let's say I want a few EC2 instances in my console on top of being able to support Fargate. I'm a big fan of the ARM architecture. So let's pick our operating system. I'm going to use Amazon Linux 2, ARM64. Maybe I'll choose T4G, which is powered by the Amazon Graviton 2 processors. Those are ARM-based. Those are awesome. I believe some of those are free tier eligible if you want to test it out. But for the demo, I'm going to choose a medium-sized instance. Let's start with 2 instances. Monitoring, if you want container insights, is right here, just a single toggle. For the demo purpose, I'm going to leave that off. And I'm ready to go. Okay.
And this, in the previous console, we had to do in 2 different UIs, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. In the previous console, I think it's a multi-step process. For the networking part, that to me, that was the most difficult part when I was first trying to learn ECS, trying to figure out all the pieces. But for the new one, a lot of the things are pre-filled for you. If you don't like them, or if you're an advanced user, you can always change them. But for most customers, you should be able to just click next, and everything should work out of the box.
Nice.
All right, that's going to take a while because it's going to provision some EC2 instances. It's going to create an auto-scaling group. like I said, all those can be found in CloudFormation. If I quickly navigate to their console, oh, they have dark mode as well. Nice. So this is this is a cluster we're trying to create. Like I said before, when you use a cluster, it's usually not just create a single cluster. There are a lot of other resources behind it. In this case, we're creating a launch template, auto-scaling group. If you like, you can see their events. Then the instances will be launched, and hopefully it'll be ready soon. You can see all the templates here. You can copy it, you can download it, you can tweak the parameters in the template. If you want to port this cluster to a different region, yeah, just change the VPC ID and subnets, and your cluster will be ready in no time.
So there were two questions which came up while we were doing it. The first one was, why was Fargate selected by default?
Fargate is something all the cluster supports. Well, Fargate is also serverless. It's really awesome. Sergey, you can probably say more on that.
I think the question was about the free tier context, right? Like, I mean, it's a trade-off. Right. With the EC2, you have free tier, and you have to take on the managing those instances, and with the Fargate, you have serverless capacity. Effectively, there's no additional configuration. The way that ECS works, there's a concept of capacity provider, which means that for each cluster, you can assign a capacity provider, and it can be Fargate, Fargate Spot, or it can be EC2 capacity. And then you can configure saying, I want to have, I have a capacity from 1 to number of EC2 instances of a certain type, and then you have then every time you launch a workload on this cluster, ECS will allocate, will try to allocate the capacity of this capacity provider, and as well as launch this workload, those containers on that capacity. So Fargate basically doesn't require you to do anything. You just say, I want the Fargate capacity. Yes, it costs money. There is actually quite small instance types, vCPU and memory types for the Fargate, which is probably going to cost you a cent. But I get the argument, right? If you really want to have a free tier, and then you just need to select EC2 instances, and in that case, as Yuri showed here, it will actually configure everything for you, and it will create those capacity providers and will schedule the container instances for you. So console will take away all the hurdle of configuring this, and will create everything with intuitive defaults.
Yeah, Fargate itself does not cost extra if you don't use it.
Yeah,
it doesn't cost extra to have capacity providers with Fargate if you don't launch Fargate tasks. It's supported by default by all the clusters, as long as Fargate is available in the region. If you're looking for free tier experimentations, just add some EC2 instances, pick the free tier eligible instance type, and just make sure you launch tasks in the EC2 capacity.
Right. So if you only charge for Fargate when you actually launch a workload, a task on that Fargate, and basically every ECS cluster that you create will have a Fargate capacity. You will see later when Yuri demos the wizard for launching the workloads that you can, in this case, his cluster supports both Fargate and EC2 capacities, and he will actually be able to pick
which one he wants to deploy it on.
Right. Yeah. I'll get to that shortly. I just want to point out, this is one of the places we kind of changed how things are organized. In the old console, capacity providers and container instances are in two different tabs. For the new console, we merged them into one because they are related. they're all right here under infrastructure.
Okay.
And let's try to launch application. But before we do that, I think we need a task definition. Let me create from scratch. So we have a guided user experience for creating task definitions. Let me come up with a creative name.
While Yuri coming up with the names, Mesh, like, why don't you give us a developer advocate perspective on what's the task definition actually is?
The task definition is the configuration of exactly what you're going to run. In other words, which container you're going to be running from which image, what kind of resources it's going to be using, how much CPU, memory, what ports it's going to be listening onto, and all kinds of different configurations for environment variables, whatever you want to inject into the runtime of your application in the container. All of that is defined with your task definition.
So
and we'll run one instance of that container, or you can create a task definition with multiple containers inside, but this will define your workload of what you're running on the ECS cluster.
Yuri, what is the new here? Like, why is it like, what's changed from a previous experience? Like,
you probably noticed there are no host port. It's because by default, we the task definitions using the Fargate launch type. With Fargate, AWS VPC is the default network mode and it's required. So if you want to launch EC2 and you want to launch it on a specific port, you can configure that later. Also, we moved all the storage and lock configurations to the next page, because here we just want the customer to focus on defining your task, like defining your application, what kind of containers you need. Here I'm just using Nginx. It's my favorite container for demos because it's small and fast. You can pretend this is a web application. Port mappings, it's right here. It's all pre-configured for me. And if you are a seasoned ECS user, you probably notice 2 more extra fields. Those are for Service Connect, which we'll talk later.
There was a question about, like, if I have a custom image from my GitLab container registry. So this field image URI you see here, where Yuri put just Nginx, this is actually a Docker, like a short version of a full, like a Docker hub image for the latest stack of Nginx image. But like, if you have something like a gitlab.com/repository or something, or if you use ECR, you just copy that here with your image tag, and this will be pointing to the image of the container that you want to launch, as Mesh told us.
This part has not changed from the last console. If you have a public ECR URI, you can use it here. You can specify versions like that. But if you do something like this, by default, it pulls from Docker Hub. If you have your own ECR repository under the same account, you can just pop in the repository URI there.
Awesome. Can you show us the next page? Like, I'm really interested. Like, you told about, I think, like, it would be interesting to show people what's different here as well.
All right, great. Like I said, this is where if you're just launching simple Fargate tasks, you can just skip this step completely. But if you need anything advanced, a lot of things are still customizable here. I launched a few EC2 instances earlier, so I want to make use of them. Here I'm saying, okay, I want to run this task definition both Fargate and EC2. Like, I can choose which computing resource to use when I'm launching tasks.
I'm a little confused here. Like, I mean, I'm not confused, sir. I know that. I think I start to role play here a little bit. But like, if I'm as a product manager, like, supposed to be a user, right? So as a user, if I'm a little bit confused. I could imagine that being a bit confused. Like, why do you select 2? Like, does it mean that it will be launched in both Fargate and EC2, or how does it work? Can you explain to people who new to
y-
ECS completely? I think there's some in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Task definitions is a definition of like my application, right? Previous page, we saw like what application is made of, like containers, ports. But here we're specifying where we want to run the task definition. By default, all the task definitions with the Fargate compatibility can use Fargate when I try to launch a service, right? Or I can say, I want to run all my workloads, or I want to run all my workloads on EC2 only, then I can change that to EC2. If I select both, that means I get to choose which computing resource I want to use when I'm launching the application.
Makes sense. I guess like the keyword here is like
yeah.
when you're launching. So the task definition is actually not the launching. It's just effectively a template, right?
Correct.
Right. Yeah, if you use something like Docker Compose, this is more like somewhat like a compose file with more features. Like I said before, I'm a big fan of ARM. Here I'm saying, hey, I want my application to be running in Linux using the ARM architecture. And by default, the task sizes are selected. In the new console, we have simplified the task size selection. If you're familiar with Fargate, you will know there are specific requirements for CPU and memory in terms of compatibility. Like Fargate, I cannot say I want one CPU and 120 gigs of memory. There are specific Fargate requirements. And in the old console, unfortunately, that's all left to the customers to decide and just to try out. In the new console, we'll list out all the compatible options in both dropdowns. So depending on if your workload is more CPU bound or memory bound, you can pick the size you want, and we'll show all the compatible options in the other dropdown. For this one, Nginx super small, like Sergey mentioned. We don't need that much computing power to run Nginx containers. So I'm just going with the smallest possible on Fargate. Of course, you can always specify the resource requirements for each individual container, but here we only got one, so I'm gonna skip this part. And here, everything's filled out for me. Task row, task execution row. If your application needs extra storage, here's how you configure it. You can just add storage. You say, oh, I want to use bind mount or EFS. We're continuously adding more volume types. So for now, only bind mount and EFS are supported. I don't need any extra storage for Nginx, so I'm gonna delete that. Oh, yeah, like I said, you can choose where the volumes are mounted in your containers. The last piece is logging. I'm gonna close this so that it looks nicer. By default, logging is enabled for your containers. In the previous console, you might need to configure logging individually for each container, but in the new console, we simplified the workflow. The logging configurations will be applied automatically to all your containers, so they're being logged into one place. And all the log group names and all the values are pre-filled for me. And if I click next here, I get one last chance to review my task definition. Environmental variables, I did not have any. Health checks, I did not set up health checks for my Nginx container. I don't expect Nginx to fail.
I'm just doing a quick time check just to make sure that we are on track with the demos. And like as much as we try to
Yeah.
show the things for the net new users, like let's try to also dive into what is so cool for all the experienced users of ECS here.
All right. And yeah, I just clicked create while you were talking, and it's ready now.
I like the deploy
Like I said, super
button.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Feel free to use this to either deploy a task or service. This is useful when you have multiple task definitions in the fly. And let's deploy a service with as many options as possible, I would say.
And for those, just while you're doing that, what a service is the running of one or more of the specific task definitions container, which we've defined, either behind the load balancer or not behind the load balancer, depending on how you want to configure your service and what it's doing, if it has to accept traffic from the outside, or it needs to run multiple instances to do things internally. But that's what a service is when we talk about here.
Yep. By default, it was using Fargate, but I just switched it to use my EC2 capacity provider, or you can just use launch type and say, okay, I want to use EC2. Especially helpful when you're running very small instances. And here's my task definition I just created. Say service. Okay, like I said, it's a service. Oh, like Mesh just introduced service. It's can run multiple tasks. Let's say, let me launch 2 tasks here. I can leave all those as default. It's gonna use rolling update, default failure detection. I can turn those off if I want to. Service connect, very big topic. We'll save that for later.
If we have time, yeah.
Yes.
And if not, you can join us again in approximately a couple of weeks. We can have a very deep dive on Service Connect specifically.
Yep. And networking is collapsed by default because we filled everything for you. Security groups, and I've already configured the security groups to accept traffic from port 80. So if you're running web applications, I'm gonna go extra hard on this demo. Let's create a whole new application load balancer to load balance our Nginx app. ALB. Let's create a new listener on port 80. Remember, that's a port we exposed in the task definition. Let's say CFTC target group. I'll give it 60 seconds to launch. And like I said, I'm gonna go extra hard.
So basically, what's happening here, right? Like, is to launch an application that is well load balanced, that is scaled, right? Like, you need to put a lot of pieces together. You need security groups, you need network, VPC, you need like a load balancer, which will load balance between different containers and different EC2 instances, and you need auto scaling that will, scale up and down your workloads. So between your EC2 instances, and I think that's what Yuri is showing here is not only you have everything in one screen to configure now, but you also have a lot of defaults set up, which you can change if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just configured a simple scaling policy that says if there are more than 5 requests on each load balancer target, it's going to scale up my service. Of course, I gave it a cooldown period for scaling and scale out. I think that's all for my service.
Very, very heavy trafficked website.
Yeah.
Nginx, yeah.
Yes. It's going to be the most robust Nginx site ever deployed.
Hello world.
Yeah. So this is going to take a few minutes. Like I mentioned earlier, you can find all your stacks right here if you're curious how things are put together. Like, we're not just launching a service, we're not just launching 2 tasks. while launching a service with load balancers, target groups, security, and auto-scaling all configured, and all those configurations are in one place. If you want to replicate this application, you can copy this and go to a different region, just go to CloudFormation and put this template in, and you get the exact same service in the other region, well, given you have a cluster there already.
Yep.
I'm gonna give it, I would say 2 minutes to warm up. Any other questions?
We have a question here. If you have to pay for login monitoring tools and extra stuff on AWS, I think this goes back to what you demoed with setting up the logging. I can answer that. The way that containers login works, and that the way what Yuri configured in task definition, is that it tells if your application is printing something or outputting some logs in the standard output of Unix, then containers allow you to redirect that information to various sources. And that's the settings you can have. So basically, if you have a statement in your code saying like print hello world, and it goes into console when you launch the task locally, on ECS, you can configure that information to go to CloudWatch. And you will be charged and billed for the CloudWatch accordingly. Or if you configure it to go to third-party services, by that services. So the ECS doesn't have any overhead for this. What all the configuration is by the and charging is for the by the services that you have send the logs towards.
And the services you consume based on the storage and whatever storage and retention method and number of events injected. There's specific pricing for each and every single one of the services.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the log groups are free. You only get charged for the amount of metrics or logs you emit to that log group.
Yeah, I mean, they're like the easiest way is to go to CloudWatch pricing page and then try to use the calculator to estimate it. But there's also information on the free tier page telling you how exactly it's going to be applied to free tier if you use the free tier. The cool thing about ECS is that some of the metrics we give on the cluster or service, you can see right here in the console, and like some of the CPU memory utilization of your services, and then are actually going to be free, and you don't have to configure anything for that. It's just there.
There was a question which came in about the fact of if we push new code into the container for a new image, can you update it in ECS? The answer is, of course, yes, you can. You just update your task definition with a new tag, which is configured. For example, if it was latest in its latest one, you would just update your task definition with that specific change. And then afterwards, redeploy your service with forcing new deployment will update all your containers running inside that service itself. So yes, that is very much possible. Without having to redefine everything again.
Right. So the way you can think about it is that as again, task definition is a template, and ECS actually stores each revision of that template. So that's what you can see here. Yuri is doing is he creates a second revision of that template, of that definition. And you can think about the task definition as a manifest of what needs to be deployed. And if you have the same tag in both cases, and then when you update an image, you just replace the tag, you don't need to update the task definition. But if you follow the best practices and you have the immutable tags for your, or you can at least don't change the tags, then you have to change the task definition, and then you can update the service using the update service workflow.
Yeah. In most cases, I don't think people use latest because that's considered a little bit dangerous. In the real application, you probably have something v1.0.0. So when I push a new container, I'm going to change that to 1.0.1. And let me navigate to my service. If I click on here, I can see right now I'm running revision 2 on my task definition. I can just change it right here to change it to use revision 3. And when I click update, it's going to do a deployment on the service, which can be found in the deployments tab. It's going to start a deployment and replace your tasks with the new task definition revision.
Yeah. This is where also like for the people who are familiar with the classic console, so you can see that like we did a redesign here. We moved some things around and like we organized so events and deployments are in the same page. You can also see that you have redesigned the deployments page with the status a little bit. The networking configuration, all the same information you used to access before, just moved in different places. Leave us a feedback. And Yuri, if you can show like this, tell us what you think button. It's on the left side on the top. So just click on it and leave us feedback.
Yeah, it's right below the toggle. Click on that. Tell us if you found a bug, if you are looking for a new feature, if you have anything. Put in some details. Sergey and I, we read every single comment coming from here. I get notifications. For real,
I don't read these comments though. I read the GitHub issues.
Yeah. I read those comments. Those come in every day. This is one of the first things I do when I start my work. I just go through the comments we got overnight and see. Yeah.
Some people read newspapers. We just read the comments here. It's the best source of information. I think what's cool also about this new page is that, like, I mean, the same things are like logs, health and metrics are like health and metrics again, like the page where you get the free data. The logs here is based on like whatever, if you have the CloudWatch configured or if we're pulling the logs from EC2 instances, like you can see that information here as well.
And Mike asked, do they auto update or do you have to refresh every time they come in?
It updates on a interval, so it's not a real time. So if I remember correctly, updates every 30 to 60 seconds or so. But if you want, you can keep refreshing if you're expecting some events to show up, or you can just view the same logs in CloudWatch.
Yuri, what if the information I see here is not enough? Like, I mean, let's go to the tasks table, for example, or like any other table that, and like, let's show customers how they can change the density of information. That's been another very common request.
Yeah. So the tables in the new Cloudscape design system are very different from the V1 console. The biggest difference, I think, is the ability to customize what you see in the tables. In V1 or in the old console, what you see is you cannot change it. But here, other than resizing, there's a gear icon to almost all the tables. So here I can customize my table. Some of those are available in the old console, but here I can change the timestamp format in the table. Let's say I don't want to use local. Let me use relative time. I don't care about desired status. Let me turn it off. Health status started at, maybe I don't really care the task size because I know I'm only running one application. So once I confirm, my table will update. It's gonna to remember all the settings I just made, including the width of the column. Like if I adjust them randomly and do a hard refresh on the page, you see it remembered everything I just did.
Yeah, and the cool thing about this is that, like as Yuri told already, is that's all based on the unified Cloudscape new AWS design system, which is not only open source, but that's adopted by all other services. So we effectively working towards like having this unified single experience across all consoles.
Oh yeah, just one quick thing.
One last thing.
To make that work, make sure you click on the cookie preferences and accept functional cookies. You don't have to accept the other two if you don't like them, but that's how the tables remember.
Awesome. We're coming slowly to the close of our hour, and I don't want to run over and take somebody else's slot on Twitch, so we're going to have to close out more or less. Firstly, thank you very much for the demo. Firstly, I didn't know that you can do that in the console with the tables with all the relative and wrapping lines, etc., etc. So I also learned something very new today. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, everybody from Twitch and YouTube that were on the chat, firing questions at us. Thank you very much for chatting with us today. How you can reach any of us, our Twitter handles are located here on the screen. You should be able to see them. My DMs are open. Please feel free to reach out to me. Everybody else, either you can send any of us a message. I'm not going to offer anybody else's DMs because I only do my own, but that's fine. But still, reach out to one of us on Twitter. Ping us. We'll be happy to help you answer your questions. Any closing remarks from either from you, Yuri, or Sergey before we close out for today?
I can say the same. You can DM me on Twitter, but there's also the button on the left top side that Yuri already showed. We really do read. It also gives us understanding of more information about which page are you coming from, so we can like debug the issues or understand the issues more proactively. If you have a general feature request or general comments not specific to our comments, feel free to reach to either Mesh or me directly. Or through your standard channels of the support for AWS. And we are open to feedback, really. Please tell us if you don't like something, and don't forget to tell us if you like something.
That's also true. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we're not only open to feedback, we want to hear your feedback.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me today. It was fun. I also, as I said, learned something new. I hope everybody else on the show learned as well. We would love to see you. First, of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our Containers on the Couch if you're watching this on YouTube. Again, please leave our feedback, and I hope you have a great day for the rest of your day, only the beginning of the week. Thank you very much for joining us all. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right.